Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to just wait another minute or so while we have everyone join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, vamos a esperar un minuto más para esperar por los otros integrantes y después ya empezamos la reunión.
Okay, I see the people coming into the room has slowed down, so I think we will go ahead and get started. We have a very full agenda today, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the Warehouse Working Group meeting for January 2nd, and Happy New Year. I would like to pass the mic over to our interpreter, Isabel, who will be providing some instructions before we get started today.
Before I go to the instructions, we are going to select what will be the language selection after. Okay. I'm going to do in Spanish first. Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la reunión, gracias por participar. Después que yo haga la presentación de las instrucciones, va a haber la selección de lenguaje en la parte de abajo, va a seleccionar inglés o español. Entonces, si ustedes hablan español y van a oír la reunión en español, seleccionen la parte de abajo de su pantalla en la computadora el idioma español y así pueden oír toda la interpretación en español. Cuando ustedes hagan un comentario, el intérprete va a hacer el cambio en inglés para hacer la interpretación en inglés. Si ustedes tienen alguna pregunta, tienen el menú en la parte de abajo para alzar la manito cuando haya los comentarios y simplemente pongan su manito para que sepan que ustedes tienen algún comentario. Gracias. For the people who's going to do the English version, please select in the computer, in the bottom will be the selections for the menu in English. There will be the two languages, Spanish and English. Just select English so you will be able to hear all the meeting in English. If you are in the phone, you also have a little three buttons where you select the language in the bottom of your screen and keep your phone mute all the time. And if you have any question, put the little hand that is in the menu so that they can see do you have any comments. And in the meantime, keep your microphone mute. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Isabel. And that interpretation function looks like it just got available, so thank you. Make sure everybody is signed up to click the language selection that makes sense for you. And we'll go to the next slide. So once again, before we begin, just a few meeting announcements. Everyone except the presenter will be muted unless called upon by the host. We'd like for you to save your questions and comments until the end of each of our presentation sections that we will be presenting. Interpretation is available. And finally, we'll be recording and posting the recording of this meeting on the district's YouTube page following the meeting, as we've done with all of our previous meetings. Next slide, please. So this is going to be an overview of what we're going to be covering in today's presentation. First, we're going to be doing attendance and introductions of district staff and meeting participants. We'll do a quick recap of this December 4th Warehouse Working Group meeting. We're going to get a quick status update on the South Coast Air Quality Management District Rule 2305 litigation. This was something that wasn't on our agenda, but was a development that occurred right around the holidays, and we wanted to make sure the group was aware of it. We're going to be having a presentation from CARB staff about their mobile source regulations, in particular the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. We're going to be getting giving a high-level overview of the possible appointment system at Calexico East Port of Entry and how that effort could be incorporated into any efforts we're discussing with warehouses. And then we'll continue our discussion about the incentive program that we were discussing at our last meeting that was modeled after a voluntary vessel speed reduction program along the coast of California and how that might be able to be transferred to a possible program for trucks and warehouse owners here in San Diego County. And then finally, with any time permitting, we'll get into any non-agenda items. Next slide, please. So first, we'd like to take a few minutes for APCD staff to introduce themselves, and then I will go down the participant list to see who is here on Zoom. If you haven't done so already, please make sure your name is in Zoom and it's correct on the participant list, and that you include your affiliation or who you represent so that we can track it better. So if you can do that while APCD staff is introducing themselves, that would be great. So I'll go ahead and start again. Nick Cormier, Rural Development Supervisor here at the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. I'm speaking weird because I have a cough drop in my mouth and I've got a little tickle in my throat, so hopefully I can make it through it today, but that's why it might sound a little weird. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Randy.
Nick, hello everyone. My name is Randy Consolation, Associate Engineer, Rural Development. Next up, Kathy.
Hello everyone. I'm Kathy Kean. I manage our planning, rural development, and incentive programs here at the Air District. And I'm not sure, I'm going to pass it off. Whoever from APCD wants to go next. Sorry, I'm doing a slide share and I can't really see everyone.
Hi, Janet McHugh, APCD Rural Development.
Okay. And then I believe our council, Vera Tayagi, will also be joining us for one of the slides here in a minute for some brief remarks about the South Coast litigation. And she can do more introduction about her when we get there. So at this point, I see, I think Vera has joined, so. Let's see here. I see Vera can, Janet, can you investigate? I think Vera might be online, but she can't unmute herself. Can you maybe see if something may be going on there? Not sure. Okay. I will start going down the list of people who are in attendance and also mention their affiliation, but if something is wrong or incorrect, please let me know. I'm just going to go alphabetically as I'm seeing it. So I see Alejandra Mir Taran from Otay Mesa Chamber of Commerce, Amber Gunser from GNA, Andre Friedman from CARB, Angelica Carrazzo from CARB, and I apologize if I'm butchering people's names. Please correct me if I'm saying it wrong. Ariel Fiddledy from CARB, Craig Deering from CARB, Christina Marquez. Christina, could you state your affiliation?
Yeah, of course. I'm with IBEW Local 569. That's the electrical workers in San Diego and Imperial counties. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Greg Jelani. Greg, could you state your affiliation or who you're representing?
Hi, Greg Alani with CARB as well.
Great, thank you. Jack Munger from IEA. Catherine Ostapok. Catherine, could you state your affiliation?
Sure, yes, I actually go by Wendy and I'm here with the U.S. Navy.
Oh, great. Thank you, Wendy. Sorry about that. Sorry, it's jumping around on me right now. Maritza Garcia from Environmental Health Coalition. Massey Hatch from IEA and MS Hatch Consulting. Michelle Guyron from Port of San Diego. Nathaniel Tate. Nathaniel, could you state your affiliation?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Nathaniel Tate, I'm with Center on Policy Initiatives as an organizer.
Great, thank you. Nicholas Paul from EHC. Paul Arneja from CARB. Jenny Katana from SDSU. Rob Swanson from California DOJ. Sarah here we go. Forestieri from CARB. I know I
Yeah, that
got that one
works.
wrong. All right, sorry about that. Scott Wall from CARB. Sterling Ross from San Diego Gas and Electric. And I see Tim Wolf from APCD from our Mobile Source Compliance Division. And Yiru Liang from CARB. Hopefully I got that right. And then I see a phone number ending in 7601. Not sure if you could give us your name and your affiliation who might be calling in today, that would be great. If not, we'll try and connect up later. Is there anybody I missed from the people that are online today? Okay. So with that, thank you, everyone. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so the following slide is a recap of what we covered at our last meeting in December. Once again, just to track on where things are going. The meeting items included an overview of the rule development process, various definitions of a warehouse, and possible non-regulatory strategies, which included the district's zero-emission truck pilot project, a model that we'll be talking about again today based on a vessel speed reduction program along the coast of California, and a strategy to target incentive opportunities for projects in what's called conforming land use areas, or partner with the city of San Diego potentially to incentivize non-conforming facilities to relocate. Some of the comments that we did receive at the December meeting included that the district should determine the need for an ISR based on available emissions data and accounting for CARB regulations within that, and also the benefits and compliance costs of an ISR before working on any rule language. Other comments we received included how will the need for an ISR be documented, such as through the measurement of toxics, emissions modeling, or potentially collaborating with other agencies like Caltrans. We also received comment that there is a concern that an ISR would limit truck trips and thus adversely affect commerce. We also talked a little bit about other definitions related to any warehouse regulatory and non-regulatory effort, including building floor area, building size versus lease space, warehouse owners and operators and how those two work together or not, manufacturing space, and then finished versus unfinished products, which would be related mostly to the manufacturing space definition. We also received comments about providing an exemption for potentially for any low truck volume facilities. We also received some comments about potentially avoiding any kind of definition that involved NAICS codes in the warehouse definition out of concern for potential gaming of that kind of information in a regulatory sense. And then we also received comments about an incentive program that would provide funding to both warehouse operators and truck fleet owners so that all can have kind of skin in the game in whatever setup that APCD moves ahead with. So we do appreciate those comments that were received, and we are definitely taking those into account as we move ahead. Next slide, please. So I did just want to, actually, I want to double check. If you're, are you able to unmute yourself at this point?
So I actually just called in too. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. All right, perfect.
So I'll just give a quick little intro and then I'll turn it over to you. But again, just I touched on it right at the beginning, but this was an additional item that we added to our agenda kind of late in the game of a development that happened with the South Coast litigation for their respective warehouse rule, which is Rule 2305. And so Vera Tiagi, who's our counsel, will be able to provide a brief update on what we know at this point. So Vera, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I apologize that I can't join by video on the Zoom and see everyone, but hopefully this works. So I think we have shared previously that South Coast AQMD Rule 2305 is currently in federal court in litigation. Lawsuits were filed by certain plaintiffs, Airlines for America and California Trucking Association, and they raised several claims, a few different claims of federal preemption, but also some concerns with violations of state and local laws, including Proposition 26. The parties did file a motion for summary judgment just on certain preemption claims, so not on Proposition 26 or some of the other claims. And a decision was made by the court on the motion for summary judgment. That decision came out on December 14th. And the court basically ruled in favor of South Coast and the other respondents on both of the three different causes of action based on preemption. So the first one was the Clean Air Act claim, which was alleging that the rule was setting basically an emission standard, and also that it affected the prices, routes, and services of the airlines and of trucking, which are both claims under the Airline Deregulation Act and F4A, the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act. Two separate statutes, but they effectively have identical language, one for airlines and the other for trucks. So the court ruled in favor of South Coast and said that Rule 2305 is not preempted under any of those different acts. And the court basically asked the parties to report back within 14 days of that December 14th order with a plan of how to move forward. So I haven't had a chance to reach out to anyone at South Coast to find out how that, what that plan looks like, but we will definitely be touching base with them to figure that out. But for now, I think this decision is good for South Coast and speaks well to the ability of air districts to move forward in the indirect source rule realm. And I can answer any questions, I suppose, at the end, Nick. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, I think we have a couple minutes before moving on to our next section. So I did want to give an opportunity to the group to, if there are any questions, we can certainly use this opportunity to ask them. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to answer at this point, given that it's not our lawsuit. But if there was anybody in the group that had any questions while Vera was online, this would probably be the time to ask them. So I'll go ahead and see if there's anybody who has any kind of questions or concerns or comments at this point. And if not, we'll certainly always be around. So if you have anything you'd like to ask us offline too, we are certainly available, and we can certainly try and get whatever we can answered, as much as we can in this space. So, okay, one last opportunity for any questions. Okay. Well, thank you, Vera. Appreciate you being with us today.
All right. I'll still stay to listen, but thank you very much.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Vera.
Bye.
All right. So I think we'll go ahead and go to our next slide, which will be something that the group has been wanting for some time now, which is getting some clarity about the CARB regulations, in particular the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation, and how that will be how that is will kind of intersperse with any kind of regulatory or non-regulatory efforts that we're potentially exploring as part of our work here in looking at warehouse emissions in San Diego County. And so we're happy to have CARB staff on the line, and in particular, Craig Deering. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name right, Craig.
Good enough. During, yes.
During, okay, great. So we have Craig on the line as well as a number of CARB staff, it sounds like, to have a presentation to talk about that today. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Craig. Craig, I don't know if you wanted to, we have the slides up. I'm not sure if that's you or Kathy that's doing that, but whatever you prefer.
No, it's not me. It must be Kathy, and that's fine. Yeah, well, I'll let you know when to go from one slide to the next. So, thanks, Nick, and thanks to the San Diego Air Pollution Control District for allowing us the opportunity to talk about the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation and what's all involved. So my name's Craig Deering. I've been managing the efforts of the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation through the development, through the approval process, and now through implementation. So go ahead with the next slide. So we all know, and I got to read my notes here. We all know that reducing air pollution is critical to protect the health of Californians. Much of the air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in California do come from the transportation sector, with medium and heavy duty trucks being among the highest emitters. As you are aware, trucks can come in many different configurations and sizes, and there are nearly 2 million trucks operating in California today. However, Class 7 and 8 tractors have a disproportionate share of the emissions, burdening communities living near freight hubs and warehouses. As shown as the blue slice in the graphs, these tractors only account for about 12% of the total truck population, but they represent almost half, 48% of the daily NOx emissions in California. So to address this, the state has set targets to reduce air pollution and carbon emissions with the goal of getting to carbon neutrality by 2045. All right, let's go to the next slide. So the board has taken many key steps to reduce emissions from medium and heavy duty trucks. The zero emission transition began with regulations on transit buses in 2018 and airport shuttles in 2019. In 2020 and 2021, the board adopted 3 major truck regulations: the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation, which will ensure the supply of new zero emission trucks from all major truck manufacturers, the Heavy Duty Omnibus Regulation, which will reduce criteria pollutant emissions from internal combustion engines sold into California, and the Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance Program, also known as the Clean Truck Check Program, will ensure that combustion engines and their emission control systems are maintained and repaired timely. The Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, highlighted in the red box, is the next step to drive commercialization of zero-emission vehicles in fleets that are best suited to lead the way. Finally, in last September, the board adopted the state implementation plan that includes a new zero-emission truck measure, which emphasizes that more is still needed to achieve federal attainment standards. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this basically, when we look at truck availability, zero emission truck availability, there's about 150 truck models available in all weight classes, and the market is growing rapidly, partly due to the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation, which I kind of touched on a little bit ago. And I'll expand a little bit more on that because I think it's important to set the stage. So let's go to the next slide. So the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation was approved in 2020. ensures that the supply of zero-emission vehicles will continue to grow in the coming years. You can see the percentage increases on the graph. It requires manufacturers to sell zero-emission vehicles as a growing percentage of sales in all vehicle classes starting in 2024, starting this year. And we're not alone. California is not alone. I think nine other states have joined California on the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, with the most recent partners being Colorado and Maryland. Other states are actively considering the regulation as well. And as part of this rulemaking, the board did set in their resolution, they set zero emission targets for future fleet requirements. And those targets are 100% zero emission drayage, last mile delivery, and public fleets by 2035, 100% zero emission buses, utility fleets, and refuse trucks by 2040, and 100% zero emission everywhere feasible by 2045. All right, let's go to the next slide. And the next slide. So let's talk about the ACF regulation. So the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation has four main components. First is the 100% zero emission vehicle sales requirement for manufacturers. And I'll talk about each one of these in just a minute. And then there's three fleet components, three fleet specific components on drayage trucks, state and local government fleets, and high priority fleets. All right, let's go to the next slide. So here's the 100% sales requirement. On the manufacturer side, the ACF regulation presents a first of its kind requirement anywhere, first of its kind requirement for medium and heavy duty trucks, establishing an end to internal combustion engine sales. Per board direction, beginning in 2036, all medium and heavy duty vehicles sold into California must be zero emission. This piece of the rule is a key element for meeting the state's carbon neutrality target and the goals laid out by the governor's executive order. The 100% requirement also sends a clear signal to the trucking market, including the manufacturers, fleets, infrastructure providers, service technicians, and even local governments. All right, let's go to the next slide. So next is the drayage truck requirements, which apply to tractors operating at the state seaports and rail yards. This requirement will create a fully zero emission drayage fleet by 2035. To conduct drayage operations in California, trucks must be registered in the CARB online reporting system, or the truckers reporting system. Legacy combustion powered trucks that will, legacy combustion powered trucks will then be allowed to register through December 31st, 2023, which just happened. These legacy trucks will then be able to remain in drayage service until the end of their minimum useful life as they visit a California seaport or intermodal rail yard, but they have to visit at least once a year. Beginning yesterday, January 1st, 2024, only zero emission trucks can be added to the registration system. So if the legacy truck isn't in there now, the only way to get a truck into the registration system is by adding it as a zero emission vehicle. And then finally, by 2035, all trucks must be zero emission for this for drayage service. All right, let's go to the next slide. So third is the high priority and federal fleet requirements. This portion of the regulation applies to well-capitalized businesses well suited for electrification. These requirements apply to any fleet that has 50 or more vehicles under common ownership and control, or any fleet with greater than $50 million in annual revenue, as well as all federal government's fleets as well. There are additional requirements on brokers and motor carriers to ensure that they are hiring compliant fleets. In addition to Class 2B and through 8, and as you guys may or may not know, Class 2B is any vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 8,500 pounds. So Class 2B and above, any vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating greater than 8,500 pounds. And that would be like an F-250, right? F-250 pickup and up. This requirement also applies to off-road yard tractors and light-duty delivery vehicles, such as those operated by the Postal Service. And you can see the little postal truck in our picture there. All right, next slide. So the default option for high priority fleets is to follow what we call a model year schedule, which I want to talk about first here. Starting January 2024, fleet owners must report which trucks will be part of the California fleet. From that point forward, all new additions to the California fleet must be zero emissions or near zero emissions. And a near zero emission vehicle, by our definition, is a plug-in hybrid, which can achieve a minimum all-electric range. And that range increases over time. I think it starts at 10 miles and it increases over time. But the point is, plug-in hybrids can qualify as meeting the zero emission vehicle requirements for this regulation. Trucks that have reached the end of their useful life must be removed from the California fleet. All right, next slide. So I just wanted to throw this table in here to give you a sense of what's going on here. So this table shows, well, to illustrate how this would work in practice, this slide shows a schedule to remove legacy trucks based on the age of the engine. As an example, a 2010 model year engine can literally operate in California all the way till 2028. And newer engines will have additional time, right? High mileage vehicles like tractors are guaranteed a minimum useful life of 13 years, but would need to be removed from the fleet once they reach 800,000 miles or 18 years. Broadly, this structure ensures a phase-in over time to zero emission based on the age of the vehicle in the company's fleet today. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is the state and local government requirements for the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation. So for state and local governments, the default option is a zero emission purchase requirement, similar to what I just talked about, but there's a little nuances here. This purchase requirement aligns well with the typical public fleet purchasing cycles. So starting in 2024, 50% of all new of all purchases must be zero emission. That means the other half can be combustion powered until 2027. And like the high priority fleet requirements, near zero emission vehicles do count towards their zero emission vehicle requirements for state and local governments as well. So as indicated, and by the way, as indicated on the map, agencies that operate or that are located in these designated counties will remain exempt from the zero emission purchase requirements until 2027. This exemption has also been granted to smaller divisions, smaller cities or counties that have 10 or fewer vehicles in their fleet. And then, of course, starting in 2027, all purchases must be zero emission. And let's see, I've got a little note here that in this structure, if no vehicles are being purchased, then no action is required. This means that fleets can continue to operate their vehicles as long as they wish. This is only for state and local governments. So if they keep a truck, 30 years or more, they don't need to upgrade to zero emission until they actually replace that one vehicle. All right, next slide. So this is the for both state and local government and high priority fleets. There is an option. There is we call it an optional ZEV milestone phase-in schedule, and this option may offer a more flexible approach and is available to, as I mentioned, high priority fleets and as well as state and local government fleets. Under this option, a certain portion of the fleet needs to be composed of zero or near zero emission vehicles. As seen in the table, the requirements are more aggressive for well-suited vehicles listed in Group 1, and then they're delayed for more specialized or longer distance vehicles in Groups 2 and Group 3. This phase-in happens gradually over the next 2 decades. So as long as the zero emission vehicle, the ZEV milestones are being met, fleet owners have considerable flexibility with the rest of the vehicles in their fleet. Fleets can prioritize which vehicles to electrify and can purchase combustion-powered engines as long as they meet the zero emission phase-in requirement. So to provide an example of an overly simplistic example of how this would work, let's assume a fleet owner has 20 Group 1 trucks, 20 Group 2 trucks, and 20 Group 3 trucks for a total of 60 trucks, right? In 2025, the fleet would need to have just 2 ZEVs. And that's calculated by multiplying the 20 Group 1 trucks by the 10% that you see in the table here. And that means two zero-emission vehicles would have to be in their fleet. In 2028, the fleet would now have to have 7 zero-emission vehicles. And that's determined through 2 calculations. One, the first calculation would be to multiply the 20 Group 1 trucks by 25%. So that gives you 5 zero-emission vehicles. And the second calculation will be to multiply the 20 Group 2 trucks, by 10%, which is 2 ZEVs. And then the total number of ZEVs that the fleet needs to have would be the sum of those 2 calculations, right? So the 5 plus the 2 would equal 7 zero-emission vehicles. We don't care which vehicles are zero-emission. Whatever vehicles you decide, they have to be the 2B through 8. But whichever vehicles the fleet decides, that's up to them. And that's why this allows the maximum flexibility. We set the targets, you determine which trucks you want to buy as zero emission. So that's the zero emission milestone phase-in option. Next slide. There are some exemptions and special provisions built into the reg. So this reg does contain a number of provisions that a fleet owner may utilize in assistance with meeting compliance requirements. These provisions address a variety of circumstances, including ZEV availability, vehicles operated for less than 1,000 miles per year, delays in infrastructure, vehicles involved in accidents, vehicles under mutual aid agreements, meeting daily usage needs, waste and wastewater fleet transition, and you can see the list. More details, by the way, on these provisions and how to qualify for them are available on our website. We're constantly putting fact sheets and training webinars on our website so if anybody wants to learn more about these provisions, they can go to our website. All right, next slide. So in summary, this regulation is phased in over the course of the next 2 decades. This is not an overnight transition. And all combustion-powered vehicles are guaranteed their full useful life under this regulation. Again, this is not going to happen overnight. Both public fleets and high-priority fleets can use the ZEV milestone option and have the flexibility to purchase near zero-emission vehicles with an all-electric range. And lastly, the regulation includes numerous provisions to ensure the fleet owner would not be out of compliance for situations outside of their control. And I've shown you the list of those provisions. All right, next slide. So when we look at emissions benefits and specifically how it affects San Diego County, the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation is expected to have a significant emissions reductions impact in San Diego County. We project that the ACF, or the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, will achieve 0.56 tons per day NOx reductions in 2032, which is the attainment year for the 70 ppb 8-hour ozone standard in that area. Please note that the baseline for these projections includes adopted regulations such as the heavy-duty inspections and maintenance, or the Clean Truck Check program that I talked about earlier, as well as the US EPA's Clean Truck Plan. So now, next slide. Now let's talk about the CARB controls. And go ahead to the next slide. So here are the commitments from the state SIP, State Implementation Plan strategy. This strategy was developed last year to make the commitments needed in order to show attainment of the 70 ppb ozone standard in the South Coast and across the state. As you can see, the measures cover a wide range of sources, many of which are being developed into regulations as we speak. 5 regulations have already been adopted over the last couple of years, as indicated with the asterisk behind each one. And then, of course, the bolded measures highlight those that are relevant to warehouses. So whatever's bolded, you can look at it from a warehouse standpoint. All right, let's go to the next slide. And let me just give you an idea what's ahead. So one more slide. I want to point out that infrastructure is obviously important here, right? We recognize that infrastructure is critical to the successful transition of California's fleet to zero-emission technology. The governor recently announced a joint agency statement of intent between California's partner agencies. This statement of intent outlines the state's shared approach to ensuring that there is enough electricity and hydrogen supply and that there is enough fueling stations to serve the growing zero-emission transportation market. Among our shared principles for coordination and cooperation are one, ensuring that equity is a consideration in the decision-making process. Two, ensuring there's robust and frequent communication between agencies, including the sharing of data and analyses when feasible. And then three, ensuring joint stakeholder engagement and coordination of planning and funding programs. In addition, CARB continues to discuss the issues surrounding infrastructure with stakeholders and electrical providers. And we actually just started our TRIG, our truck implementation, truck regulation implementation group, which we call TRIG. We just had our first meeting with the infrastructure subcommittee in December, and there's going to be more meetings to come. All right, next slide. So when we think of implementation, our truckers reporting system, and trucker stands for Truck Regulation Upload Compliance Reporting System. That system should be familiar for anybody who's had to register their trucks with ARB. But that's being updated to align with the reporting requirements of this regulation. Let's see. The truckers reporting system will allow fleets to report vehicles for and entity information that can be used to submit requests and exemptions and extensions to the rule. To assist with our outreach efforts, approximately 30, as I mentioned earlier, about 30 fact sheets will be available to cover the rule requirements, provisions, processes, and frequently asked questions. So we also have some video summaries. We have some training workshops. By the way, there's some training workshops that are underway, and some that we've already had, and we have recordings of those on our website. And as I previously mentioned, we will be holding a truck regulation implementation group, the TRIG, meetings with specific topic areas to include infrastructure, outreach, and rule implementation. So that's all coming. And then the last slide. I'll just wrap this thing up by saying that all rulemaking documents, fact sheets, and contact information is available on our website. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us, and we'll help out any which way we can. So Nick, that's the ACF regulation in a nutshell.
Great. Well, thank you, Craig. That's really great information. That was I liked how you boiled that down into 20 minutes. It's a difficult regulation that I know a lot of people on this call and beyond this call, have questions about and are still learning. So I really appreciate you kind of boiling that down in a very understandable way. So and I just want to say one thing, Nick, and I know that this is a complicated regulation. I get it. It took 2 years of my past life here to put this together, but not everybody needs to know everything about the regulation, right? So if you're a state and local government, well, that's what you need to focus. If you're a high priority fleet, well, you need to focus on that part of the regulation. So that's why we have these training modules, and if you go to our website, if you just you hone in on that part of the regulation that affects you, we've got a lot of material that can help you. And we also, as you see on the slide here, we have a ZevFleet email account that we monitor daily. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll help out in any way we can. Great. Thank you, Craig.
Yep.
So at this point, I do want to pause, and we do have quite a bit of time allocated if people in the group had questions, comments about CARB's presentation or in relation to what we're doing here with the warehouse working group. So I do want to pause and have an opportunity for as many of these questions as possible. We do have, like I said, quite a bit of time dedicated. So I would encourage everyone to do that. And I already see a couple hands being raised, so that's great. Just a reminder for, I think we'll leave Carb's presentation up in case anybody has any questions about any of the slides for now.
Oh, good point.
But I would just want to remind the group that if you are, I think we have a few people on the phone. If you dial *9, I believe that will raise your hand or put you in the queue to if you have questions, if you're using by phone. And then you're also welcome to use the chat feature as well. That's available if anybody doesn't want to speak verbally. So we'd like to kind of self-regulate your time to about 3 minutes per speaker, but we usually are pretty good on time, and we've got a lot of time dedicated to this particular subject. So with that, I will go ahead and I think Jenny, I think you had your hand up first, at least on my end. So do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, it's more of a clarifying question. Thank you for that talk. Does seem very complicated. I'm actually just wanted to look at a slide again and just make sure I understood it. This was a slide about 5 slides ago where you showed the predicted emissions reduction after this. Yeah, this one. So this is NOx emissions for the whole county. And I guess I was just surprised that was less of a reduction than I was thinking it would happen. So I was just kind of curious if you could comment on what the other emission sources are that are still around after this has taken place.
Yeah.
Penelope, I can jump in.
Thanks, Sarah.
There's Sarah, and I manage the on-road model development section, which focuses on heavy-duty emissions inventory. So these represent all NOx emissions from heavy and light-duty vehicles, everything that operates on California roads in the baseline. And then there's a reduction due to advanced clean fleets. And so when we're modeling advanced clean fleets, we kind of first tried to figure out like which vehicles would be regulated, which vehicles in our inventory, because these are, there's like the drayage fleets, of course, public fleets, but then there's also the high priority fleets that have, 50 vehicles or more, or like a certain revenue threshold. And so some of the remaining emissions could be those fleets that are not subject to the rule. But then in addition to that, the rule isn't fully phased in at this point, and we still have, I think, like Group 3 and the milestone requirement, which I think phases to 100% zero emission in 2042. And so as time goes on after 2030, you'd see like an even greater reduction. So that's kind of the factors for why we still see a good amount of emissions like left over after the implementation.
I guess a follow-up question would be, have you tried modeling this in a spatial fashion? Because I would think that the emission reductions to disadvantaged communities along, let's say, the 905 corridor would be much greater. And I'm just curious if you've done any spatial emissions reductions modeling. Thank you.
I haven't done anything. We haven't done anything too spatially aggregated. We assumed that there should be some reduction factor for categories that we have in our inventory statewide. So this can include like line haul trucks, drayage trucks, etc. And then we kind of see what that looks like, that truck mix looks like at the county level. And then we just assume to be the same reductions. But we are interested in actively looking into other data sources to kind of more accurately spatially allocate trucks, because it's very challenging. I mean, trucks operate very far from where they're registered. And so we're looking into, the so-called big data sources like Streetlight, for example, and trying to figure out how we can improve the resolution at higher spatial scales. So that's a really great point. But right now, the information we have is, or our projections are kind of coarse and just at the county level.
Thank you.
Great. Tim Garrett from Sandag, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Craig, for the presentation. I saw some news that their enforcement of advanced clean fleets is going to be delayed. I think it's related to EPA approval. Could you speak to which aspects of the regulation are going to be delayed? Is it the entire regulation? And when you might expect that to be resolved and then kind of go into full effect?
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Yeah. So we just published an announcement, and there is a notice on our website about the delay of the enforcement of the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. As you saw in the presentation, the regulation is takes effect this year, January 1 of 2024. But in order for us to enforce the regulation, we do need a waiver, or we believe we need a waiver. We're actively seeking a waiver from the US EPA at this point. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just continue, to implement the regulation. We're asking fleets to report their vehicles as they're supposed to report. We just if there's if there's a violation, or you find yourself not immediately in compliance, we won't be. We're telling everybody we're not going to take any enforcement action until we get approval from the US EPA that we can move forward with this. So the notice does have an overview of what that means, and part of it is registration. The other part obviously is operation, but it is our intent that once we do get the waiver, we will then enforce the rule as if it were in effect starting in 2024.
Thanks. And maybe you don't know, but if you know the timeline of when you might expect to receive.
So the only thing I know, Tim, is we submitted our waiver request already. That was done before the end of last year. So we're just waiting. It's just a matter of waiting to hear back from the US EPA. I'm not sure what their timeline looks like at this point, but that's where we're at. All of everything that we could have done has been done on our end. Now it's just a waiting game.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add, some Paul Ranger work under Craig on the ACF regulation.
Yeah.
So the waivers for the high priority fleet and state and local government fleet. I mean, sorry, the high priority fleet and drayage portions. We don't believe we need a waiver for the state and local government fleet portion. So that rule is being implemented as written, essentially. And I think that's in the notice that was posted in chat.
That's a good point, Paul. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tim, for bringing that up. I know that was kind of on my list to ask about too, because we saw that come through as well. Okay, I see Andrew Aguilar and then Jack Munger.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess this is more of a question to Sarah, the modeler. And as I was taking a look through some of CARB's emission models that they had, there was one that jumped out at me in particular. Saw it was particularly useful. It was the emissions projection analysis model, CPAM, which includes the on-road emission sources from the MFAC model, as well as area sources like non-road associated and I believe even stationary. And one thing that jumped out at me as I was taking a look at PM 2.5 emissions across the different sources was that there appeared to be a sort of asymptote that they were reaching when it came to emissions of PM 2.5 for all sources associated with the mobile source. So I think that there's been a lot of emphasis, rightly so, on the tailpipe emissions as that goes to zero. But what I guess I'd found kind of surprising or a little shocking was that, brake, tire wear, and road dust actually appeared to be increasing in the models. And I was just wondering if the board was aware of these model projections moving forward in the future with electrification, if this is something that if these risks or kind of like this diminishing returns has been explored yet.
That's a really excellent question. And so, the primary reason why those emissions would be going up, especially for brake and tire wear, would be because of the vehicle miles traveled growth that we're projecting in the future. So we think that there will be like freight growth in the future. So that leads to more miles traveled and more emissions. And so for the emissions to be offset, there'd have to be some sort of mechanism like technology change to kind of offset those. We don't model any tire wear emissions reductions because we just we're not sure how like different technologies are going to affect tire wear emissions, and that's still an active area of research. And I can link, some of CARB's current research projects, or website with CARB's research projects related to brake and tire wear somewhere in the chat, or I can just send it to Nick or someone afterwards. But we do model about a 50% reduction in brake wear for zero emission vehicles due to savings from regenerative braking. But we really are hoping to, in future versions of MFAC, refine those estimates more and better understand the impact of regenerative braking technology on emissions. And then tire wear is a kind of a big question, and we don't model that differently for different technology types, but it's something we're hoping to get more information on in the coming years.
No, thank you. And have you seen any visibility on the road dust generation as well? Because that seemed to have the largest increase. I was aware of the 50% regenerative braking across the board, across all vehicle classes, passenger and class 2B and above. But I guess it was the sheer amount of road dust that was projected. I'm presuming because of, like you had alluded to, an increased VMT, as well as perhaps more heavier vehicles on the roads as our infrastructure gets older. Is that something that you had seen personally?
So MFAC only models, like, in terms of non-exhaust PM sources, we model brake and tire wear, but we don't model road dust, even though the processes are closely linked, of course. Like there could be like road brake wear or like a tire wear, like that's on the ground, like it's resuspended. So that's also, something we're very interested in. But another group in CARB has a lot more expertise on that. And I know that Caltrans has a contract to kind of improve some of those estimates. And happy to connect you with them if you're interested.
Absolutely, if you could, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. Jack Munger.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for the presentation, Craig. My question is much more general than my predecessors. And that is, if I heard you right, you said that ACT will guarantee availability of electric trucks. I mean, that's one of the goals. Understanding that merely writing a regulation doesn't guarantee the availability of the technologies that we will need for this. So I was wondering, is CARB actually doing something beyond the creation of these regulations that will actually guarantee the availability, that the technology is there for the different levels of trucks and the size and the availability and the strength and all that sort of thing? Is CARB actually doing something in that regard?
Yeah, so thanks, Jack. So absolutely. I mean, the regulations we have basically set the floor, right? We're going to say, look, if you want to sell trucks in California, then you're going to have to, a certain percentage of those trucks have to be zero emission. That's the floor. Can they sell more than that? Absolutely. And we did through the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, we did identify certain category groupings where they would be able to get credit for those trucks in those groupings. But we go beyond that, right? So we also have incentive programs in California to let the manufacturers and the fleets know, the purchasers, let them know that, hey, if you're interested in a zero emission vehicle, we do have some incentive programs in place. I know the federal government has some as well. But yeah, so through incentives, we're getting people into to experiment with this technology, and then through regulations, we're setting the floor so that these vehicles, the manufacturers are well aware that they're gonna have to continue to design and develop and offer up a wide variety of these zero emission trucks, so that they can meet their regulatory obligations. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that's kind of what we're doing.
I guess. So does CARB have pretty strong certainty that the manufacturers of these trucks are going to meet the needs of the market?
So
yeah,
this is
yeah. Go ahead, Paul. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I dropped some information in chat. So just first, when looking at the status of the market, the manufacturer already 2 years ahead of what the requirements are. So as Craig mentioned, the advanced clean truck regulation doesn't start until 2024, but the manufacturers as a whole have already sold enough ZEVs to meet that requirement. So both for the lighter vehicles like delivery vans and up to the heavier vehicles like semi trucks. So we are seeing that the manufacturers are definitely making investments and there's demand for the vehicles. And at the same time, this is a separate thing, but this past year, our agency signed what we call the Clean Truck Partnership with all the nation's leading truck manufacturers. And they, as part of the agreement, the manufacturers have agreed to comply with our zero emission truck regulations, our cleaner combustion standards, regardless of any litigation, and working together with us to move towards a cleaner transportation future. So we're seeing that the manufacturers are investing in placing technology in the roads, and we have buy-in from them to keep moving in this general direction. I can share more information on that Clean Truck Partnership in chat too.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. That's such an important component of all of this. So that, as you know, I don't have to tell you all that there have been many doubts since the beginning of the discussions on this and other clean vehicle regulations that the technology, whether or not the technology could meet the demand and the needs of the market. And I think the information you just shared, Paul, would be really helpful to have in the future in some of these other discussions to give people, and I think guess the confidence that CARB is actually communicating with these sources and providers and does in fact have confidence that they're going to have the types of vehicles ready for the market when they need to.
Thanks for the feedback.
Sure.
Great. I do want to highlight before getting to Michelle, who is next, and then Tim. CARB has posted a number of good links to the ACF enforcement notice that we were talking about, as well as the research opportunities related to brake and tire wear, the ACT market update, and a contact for the road dust modeling methodology that we were also talking about, as well as Clean Truck Partnership. So CARB team is rocking it here with the links here. So thank you, I appreciate that. Michelle at the port.
Thank you. This is a question about the slide on agency coordination on infrastructure. I have a few questions. What happens if the electrical infrastructure and energy supply are not sufficient to meet new CARB regulations? Will the regulatory extensions in some of these regulations be enough? Which state agencies will take responsibility if the infrastructure and energy supply are not sufficient? And does CARB consult with other agencies prior to drafting new regulations?
So there's a lot of questions there. I can tell you for sure. We have met with the California Energy Commission, the California Public Utilities Commission, and all of the agencies listed on this website. And they're already putting together planning documents that show how the infrastructure rollout is going to work to meet our zero emission truck requirements. And it's not just the trucks, it's also the light duty vehicles. So they have planning documents in place. I think if you visit their websites, you can see some of the planning documents they have. But yeah, this comes from the highest levels, Michelle. The governor made it very clear that we need to work together with all of our sister agencies to make sure that the infrastructure is available. And of course, you may have seen in my presentation we know that there's going to be challenges, right? We know that there may be a situation where they're trying to install infrastructure, and then the utility company says, "Hey, that's great, but it's going to be a couple of years before I can get this thing all set up." So we have a provision in the regulation itself. So if there are delays that are outside of the control of the fleet owner, these delays, typically for either whether it's a construction delay or utility rollout delay, we're going to work with the fleets. We're going to give them some flexibility here until the infrastructure can get installed. So I don't know who takes the lead. I'm assuming that there's going to be the Energy Commission, obviously, and the Public Utilities Commission are going to take a major lead in this. But all of these, and I think I also mentioned we have a truck regulation implementation group, TRIG we call it, a truck regulation implementation group with infrastructure as one of the main subcommittees. And we have all utility companies on this TRIG subcommittee. We have the Energy Commission, the Utility Commission. A lot of stakeholders are represented here, so we're working through those. They're asking a lot of tough questions, and we're getting some of those questions resolved. But yeah, and I think there might be a link on this slide here if you want to get more information on what we're doing from an infrastructure side.
Yeah, and I can add. So I posted another link in chat. This one's about basically the Energy Commission does lead the modeling efforts and forecasting like the increase in supply needed to support both our zero emission truck regulations along with all the other regulations that CARB needs, as well as the overall state grid planning. So something that the Energy Commission themselves is actively working on, and they do take projections from our upcoming regulations and insert that into the modeling. So for example, as we were working on the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation these past years, we were working directly with the Energy Commission so that we could feed them our preliminary information so they can start doing the modeling work to figure out what the actual energy demand would look like. I think what they're finding is that the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation as a whole will have an impact on estimated demand by about a 3% increase by 2035, something around that ballpark. So there is going to be an expected increase, but it is within the bounds of what the utilities are expected to be able to manage. But as Craig mentioned, there's a lot of variability in like what will happen on a site-by-site basis. So some sites might have quicker access to electrical capacity, some may not. And that's why we built in these exemptions into the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. And our board made clear that they are interested in making sure that the infrastructure rollout does happen in a smooth manner. And so we'll be providing updates on how these delays are, where these delays are occurring and what actions might need to be taken. So I think we're all interested in this and we're hoping to watch this as it rolls out.
Okay, thank you. And another thing I should have put in there is, because I see Caltrans on this slide, people are talking about the need for improved roads to deal with the increased weight of vehicles that have batteries in them, and even thinking about the weight limit needing to be increased because drayage trucks and trucks that are carrying a lot of freight, they don't want to reduce how much they move. So what's the status of partnership with Caltrans on that type of infrastructure, our roads and highways?
Well, so Paul, you can answer in just a minute here. So there already is, I think, a 2,000 pound increase that was approved by the state legislature some years back, and that does help with the extra weight that these electric trucks are in the early years, right? The early years, we're going to see these trucks are going to weigh a little bit more because we need the larger batteries in them. But as technology improves, we would think that the weight would not be an issue in future years. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Caltrans is aware. And we can't exceed weight limits, right? I mean, the vehicle code is very clear. The trucks are only allowed to weigh so much before they exceed their limits. So Caltrans works directly with I'm sure they work directly with the truck manufacturers to make sure that those weight limits are adhered to. And I think that's where the Highway Patrol, right? The Highway Patrol checks weight limits as well.
Yeah, and I'll add that one of the other agencies listed here, California Transportation Commission, they spent the last couple of years working on a report for SB 671, which looks at a lot of the concerns about just moving our freight sector to zero emission. So they've published their draft report, or I think awaiting finalization earlier well, I guess at the end of last year. And they do talk about some of these considerations, of weight being one of them, time to recharge or refuel. I think one thing I just want to highlight is that when we talk about zero emission in our truck regulations, we are talking about both battery electric and fuel cell systems. So both of them can qualify as a zero emission vehicle. So for some of these applications where weight might be a limiting factor, fuel cells are an opportunity to have similar payload performance without any trade-offs. So I just want to make sure that's highlighted.
Thanks.
Great. I just want to do a quick time check. I see we have 2 more commenters left that have their hands up, and then I did have one question to pose to the group while Carb is on the line, just to get some more feedback to Carb staff in case. Is Carb staff good to go until about 4:20? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was respectful of your guys' time too. So, we'll go first to Tim and then to Massey, and then I'll kind of conclude with a question from my perspective.
Thank you. So you mentioned, Craig, the online truckers compliance reporting system. So I'm assuming that you're probably collecting only minimum information from the fleet operators, like the number of trucks, the age, the mileage, whatnot. Are you able to collect any information about what those trucks are, being used for, what types of trips they're making? Because this working group being focused on indirect sources and warehouses potentially, are you able to determine, certain number of trucks or certain fleets are operating certain number of miles, or they're going to warehouses more often? Anything that would be able to be collected that would be helpful for an indirect source rule?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tim. So I can tell you the truckers reporting system, we only collect information about the type of truck, right? So if it's a tractor, a day cab tractor or a sleeper cab tractor, we'll know that information. We don't typically collect mileage until the truck reaches a certain age, and that's because of the useful life provision. We have to collect mileage to determine whether it's exceeded its useful life or not. But if it's not close to being old or having high mileage, that's not information we would collect. The only other information we collect is where the truck I don't know if it's registered or where the entity is located, where the truck is, whoever's reporting that truck. So if it's a city of Sacramento, they're reporting their trucks, we would want to know. Or they would have to provide information about their facility location. We did collect some information. It's called a large entity reporting information that did capture some information about mileage, type of truck use, and so forth. It is on our website. You have to go to our Advanced Clean Trucks website, Advanced Clean Trucks website, not Advanced Clean Fleets, Advanced Clean Trucks website. And there is some aggregated information in there about what information we were able to collect, and that information was only collected from larger fleets that had 50 or more trucks that operated in their fleet. So, do we have information? Yes, it's limited, and that information was collected back in 2021. So it may still be somewhat relevant, but we use that information for the development of our advanced clean fleets. So yes and no. We don't specifically, we can't tell you what the truck's used for. We can tell you the type of truck. That's all we can do.
Great. Massey.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, my question was very similar to Tim's. I'm just wondering if there's some analysis or information out there that would determine how emission reductions related to that result from advanced clean trucks, advanced clean fleets would impact emissions from warehouse activities. And it sounds like there's no direct line or enough information to directly analyze that, but there are bits and pieces that maybe can be looked at, and some conclusions may be reached, right?
Yeah, those are all good questions, Massey. Paul, I'm not sure, maybe Sarah, I don't know if we have any information about, emission reductions from trucks that visit warehouses. I'm not sure. When we looked at this, obviously it was a statewide emissions impact assessment of what we did. We did look at ports and we looked at rail yards to see what emission impacts would happen there. But I don't, yeah, Massey, I don't think we do. Paul or Sarah, is there any?
I think we have broad numbers about what's happening to the overall tractor population. Tractors are the most common vehicles that enter the warehouses, but I think it's hard because every warehouse has different operations, different types of on-road equipment, off-road equipment. It really varies site to site, and we don't have that level of information on hand, by my knowledge.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't help you there.
Yeah, no problem. It's a recurring question I think that's popped
Yeah.
up in this group. You know, just trying to better connect. And this is kind of where I was going to go as well about, you know, the connection between what we're trying to do in this group, which is to look at, you know, regulatory and non-regulatory options in the warehouse space and how ACF just kind of gets incorporated into that and are where the opportunities are to make reductions that may not be covered potentially in an ACF regulation. As you you know, indicated in your presentation, ACF applies to a lot of fleets, but it may not apply to all fleets. You know, that's certainly something in my mind that is a major nuance to this regulation that stands out to me. Where a potential warehouse regulation could potentially net some benefits for emission reductions that would go beyond an ACF regulation. So I was just kind of interested, and this is not necessarily directed at CARB staff, but maybe for anybody in the group, if after hearing today's presentation, you know, what your takeaways are, or is there any information that you think we still might need to get either from CARB or additional agencies to see what we still need as part of our efforts here in this working group? Because we're all trying to lead to, you know, what solution can work best here in San Diego County, be it a regulatory or non-regulatory or both options. For warehouse space, for indirect sources from warehouses. So I just wanted to pose that to the group in the final minutes that we have CARB staff on the line so they can maybe hear anything that there might be some feedback there. I see Alejandra's hand up. Do you have any feedback on that, Alejandra?
Yes, and I apologize if this was addressed at the last meeting and that I was not able to participate. But my understanding after meeting with CARB on one particular issue that I think there's a lot of opportunity for this group to get engaged with is the enforcement of the existing regulations, like the truck and bus rule. I think there's a lot of opportunities for data sharing with other federal agencies, for example, and even more enforcement needed on basically people are cheating on the truck and bus rule, and that's polluting our region, basically trucks that are not complying with this. And it doesn't seem that CARB is doing enough, or maybe because they just don't have the staff. And I know they have these new programs and everything, but basically trucks are just, this is how I understand it. I'm not a trucker, like basically saying, oh, I'm part of this daily exemption, but nobody really follows up with them. So my point is, I think one way to tackle pollution immediately where we could see reductions is if we focus on, and maybe APCD can help here, on actual truck operators complying with the existing regulations. If that makes sense. I think that's like low-hanging fruit.
Thank you, Alejandra. That's a great comment. And you know, I think you know, what I can tell you, at least on APCD's front on that right now, is we're one of the first, if only, air districts right now in California that does have a mobile source compliance team to help CARB, you know, investigate those, to help CARB enforce their state regulations at the local level. So we are doing something on that, at least locally. There's still probably more that we can do But you know, definitely comment heard on that there's probably more that can be done on that. Carb, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that in any way, but
No.
I okay, just wanted to check. And then I do see a quick question from Tim in the chat. It says, do Mexico domiciled fleets also report fleet information in truckers for trucks that operate in California? I think I know the answer, but I want to let Carb staff answer that.
No, that's that. Yeah, thanks, Nick. I did see that. Tim, thanks for reaching out. The answer is yes. If the vehicle is domiciled outside of the state of California, whether it's you know, Mexico or Arizona or wherever, and it wants to visit California, it has to be registered as part of their California fleet. So any truck that may be domiciled outside of the state, but on occasion will come into the state, they have to register that truck as part of their California fleet. Otherwise, if it comes into the state and we catch it operating here and it's not registered, they're subject to citation. So the answer to that is yes.
Great. Well, I know we ran a little bit over time, but this was a good discussion. That was we had a lot of good feedback here. So I want to really extend a thank you to the CARB staff and Craig to providing this information and answering some questions for us. And, you know, we'll hopefully be in touch if there's any other questions that arise over these next couple of months as we embark towards future meetings. You know, we'll certainly be in touch with you and the other folks on CARB who are a part of this standing working group. So really do appreciate your time and all your information today.
Absolutely. Always willing to help. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you. Okay. That was a really good presentation. So at this point, I think we'll go ahead and switch gears to, we have two other agenda items that we wanted to get through, and we've got about 40 some odd minutes to do it, which I think is plenty of time. But we'll go ahead and bring up the presentation and switch gears to a concept that we've talked about in past meetings, or it's been brought up in I think early in the warehouse working group meetings. Well, actually, I think let's give a couple minutes for the rest of the group to respond to CARB's presentation. I was kind of going down this road a little bit with my question to Craig, or opening it up to the group, but what elements of CARB's presentation did you feel were most important in relation to any warehouse regulatory or non-regulatory option? And two, what additional information is needed from CARB to better assist the warehouse working group? So I did want to just debrief coming off of CARB's presentation a little bit to hear, you know, did this help us in any way, or is there any more information that you're wanting to see either from CARB or another agency? I would like to kind of point this, you know, to put this to the working group before we move on to see if, you know, what information should we get, or was this helpful in some way to answering some of the questions that we were getting early on in our first working group meetings, where we were trying to figure out, you know, what's the relationship between the ACF and you know, warehouse emissions. I don't think we have a full picture of that yet, as we were kind of alluding to in the last couple of comments that we got there, but I'll kind of open it up to the group to see if there's any other feedback or comments on that. Yeah, Alejandra.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think the question is not only on ACF, but also on the truck and bus rule, because I believe, and I'm certainly no expert, but there were some major changes that started as of this year as well, and last year, that should also mean a reduction in emissions and pollution. And I think it would be important for the group to understand that as well, assuming CARB has that information in terms of forecasting. For example, like all these trucks that are now have to be natural gas trucks versus diesel trucks, the ones coming in from Mexico. I believe there were some major changes this year. So I think that's very important for the group to understand, not just ACF in terms of the future, but what happened before and how that's impacting today's reduction in pollution.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. We can certainly reach back out to CARB and see if we can get some more information on how the existing regulations are impacting that as well. Jack, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Just to elaborate on that a little bit and ask, actually to follow up on Massey's question point. I think it's just so important that San Diego understand what it can expect from a warehouse rule in terms of emission reduction. I think it's important and essential for every governing board member to be able to understand what return is going to be generated by an enormous program, much like, well, the only one they know really is what has taken place in LA, since that's the main one. But San Diego is not Los Angeles, not in Los Angeles in terms of truck traffic or numbers of warehouses or anything. So I guess I would just like to see CARB provide some more detail to where they're going to get with the existing programs they already have underway. And then I suppose that'll leave it up to you all to determine what gap exists or what benefit could be generated by a warehouse rule above and beyond that. And particularly in consideration of the cost, time, and so forth.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That is something we'll continue to explore. I don't think we have the answers today, but that is certainly going to be something we're going to be continue to look at.
Thanks, Nick.
Andrew.
Thanks, Nick. And if I can piggyback to what Jack was mentioning about kind of our expectations on benefits with a potential new rule on top of everything else. And I guess it just, for me, it harkens back to taking a look at CARB's model data. What really concerns me the most is that if we were to take a look at 2023 and 2022's projected emissions for mobile sources now versus mobile sources once there's more electric vehicles on the road in the future, it appears that we've already that the benefit has been maximized already with the current rule set, and that actually moving forward, accelerating to more electrification into the future might actually decrease air quality. So that's this kind of this concern that's really starting to bubble up with me. Whereas are we there yet? Are we already there as far as an optimal reduction in emissions? And I didn't. That's the thing that I'm still trying to reconcile, I guess. And it's something that I think that this as a working group we kind of really need to assess, and maybe to piggyback on Jack's point that he's brought up multiple times too, is a lot of the information that we're relying on, or that's often referenced and sourced in kind of spurning this inspiration for these regulations, is coming from very, very old model data from 2016 and even older, like when people refer to Cal EnviroScreen. So I think it would behoove us then to really understand our current state where we are now, because the model projections actually look like night and day difference to what it was in 2016. And it would be kind of nice to confirm that, to kind of help us get a reference point of where we really should be starting from.
Thanks, Alex. Tim.
Thanks. And I just want to keep focus also on like the mapping and modeling within the region, where some of, like, if CARB regulations are implemented to full extent, there's probably a certain amount of regional benefit, but not expecting that the benefits will be shared equally throughout the region. If I remember from our mapping from a couple of meetings ago, is the diesel particulate matter in particular really follows the highways, and if particulate matter might not be as improved by some of these zero emission regulations, I think it's obviously we should do zero emission vehicles, but I guess just like it would be helpful for CARB to just continue to support the modeling below just the regional level to help us understand forecasting what will be achieved as a result of CARB's regulations, and that we can hopefully build on that with some sort of indirect source action to try and provide improvements where the communities are most impacted currently.
Great, thank you, Tim. Okay, well, that's great feedback from everybody. I do want to switch gears and move on to the next item, but I do appreciate everyone's comments and time to that item because I think it was very important to hear, and we'll continue to look into the questions and comments that we received today. So as I alluded to, we did want to switch gears a little bit, talk about something interrelated, and it was introduced a couple of meetings ago. This was we wanted to talk about a proposed project that's been mentioned in relation to the work that we're doing here at the Warehouse Working Group. We're going to be just introducing the project or the proposed project today so that everyone can better understand what it is and what it proposes to do. And actually, I'm taking up Randy's time. Randy was supposed to be talking about this, so I'm gonna fall back now and let Randy take the wheel here. And I apologize, Randy, for kind of just moving through on that. So go for it.
No problem. Thank you, Nick. So as Nick mentioned, we're going to kind of go over this appointment system that's being proposed for Calexico, East Point of Entry. And basically, Nick was saying, better understand what it is and what it proposes to do. We then hope to bring a representative in from Caltrans at February's WWG meeting to provide an update on where it stands and dive deeper into how it might interconnect with any regulatory effort being done with warehouses and distribution centers. As envisioned, this proposed project is intended to mitigate northbound and southbound truck idling, which could substantially reduce pollution and wait times associated with trucks. Caltrans is currently developing a proposed feasibility study that will develop a concept for a joint operations system for the Calexico East Point Port of Entry, POE. This will also debut the first land POE appointment system for commercial vehicles and potentially passenger vehicles. A microwave communications connection will be installed between the United States Customs and Border Protection, CBP, in Calexico and the Regional Caltrans Transportation Management Center, TMC, located in San Diego. Next slide, please. The project proposes to relay border conditions such as wait times and incident information to border crossers through a mobile application. In doing so, the traveling public will easily have access to traffic conditions and can plan their trips accordingly. Using current border conditions, the system will allow commercial vehicle border users to pay for a designated appointment window to cross the border. If successful, this pilot has the potential to be scalable by expanding to other POEs and could be utilized at other POEs along the northern and southern borders in the United States. This system could also expand upon appointment systems that are currently being used at the nation's seaports and introduce proven technologies to land POEs. Caltrans is still in the preliminary stages of developing the feasibility study. As mentioned, we expect to have more information to share on this project in February, and we've invited Caltrans staff to speak more on this topic at next month's WWG meeting. Next slide, please. We'd like to now pause the presentation to take any questions or comments you may have at this time on the appointment system at the Calexico East POE. Here are some questions to think about. First, what questions does the WWG have for Caltrans staff about this project so we can ensure their presentation at February's WWG meets our expectations? And second, how do you envision this Caltrans project fitting in with any regulatory or non-regulatory effort being pursued by APCD to reduce emissions from warehouses and distribution centers?
Alejandro.
Yes, I mean, just trying to answer the questions that are being posed here. I mean, I see this as, I mean, let me just, for people who may not know, right now we have at least 4,000 trucks idling right on the border on the Mexican side every single day, maybe not on Sundays. But that is, if this works, and it hopefully will work, that would decrease that idling, and that, I don't know how you model that, but that would also reduce pollution significantly, and it wouldn't be costing warehouses anything. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea to propose as part of this, I don't know, call it indirect rule. Maybe you want to champion this project because it's a much better bang for your buck, assuming it works, of course, in my mind. Again, because the pollution we're getting from Mexico from these trucks, I mean, is obviously crossing into California. Versus proving like this rule, is it really going to, I mean, if a fee for warehouses, will that really reduce pollution or not? This clearly would, in my mind. Those are my comments.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra. That it's definitely something that is intriguing to us as well. And we can definitely see some benefits, emission reduction benefits from this project, as you said, assuming it works and it gets implemented in other areas. There's also talk about that implementing that system at different ports, you know, marine ports as well, if that works too. So the interconnectivity of the system potentially stands to really gain a lot of benefits, we think, if it works right. One thing that we were trying to think about and brainstorm a little bit is how would that connect if we did have some kind of regulatory effort or non-regulatory effort into how that system might interplay with what, you know, if we had a rule that might perhaps be similar to a South Coast warehouse regulation, is there some kind of way that we can interconnect the two, or is there, you know, those are the things that I think we're hoping to try and figure out with the help of this group, is to see how that might connect, those two ideas to connect with each other. Although there is a lot of benefit, emission reduction benefit there that we could potentially see. I see Maritza Garcia's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to understand, I guess, how this would work. So the app would give you the conditions, and then the trucker pays to be able to get a spot in line, essentially. How much, like, what's the incentive to pay to be able to go across as opposed to waiting? Is the price going to be feasible? Does the trucker pay for it, or does the company?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody online can answer that. I'm not sure if we know that offhand based on what the information that APCD has, but those are questions that we could certainly pass along to our folks at Caltrans, who are more deeply embedded with the projects and what it might entail. So that's certain. I don't know if anybody else on the line might be able to answer Maritza's question, but I think that's what I'm thinking, is we might have to ask those questions to the Caltrans staff, who eventually, we're hoping to get the Caltrans staff in February to join us to provide us a little bit more detail about the project, so we can hopefully answer questions like that.
Let me just say, and maybe Tim knows this, but we didn't even foresee any kind of payment to use the system. I mean, we were visualizing it as a free system. I mean, it would help Tijuana a great deal, because there's a lot of chaos in Tijuana as well because of the truck idling all across the streets. So, I mean, okay, again, to be seen from the pilot program, that's what they're going to be testing, but we certainly do not foresee any kind of toll or pricing on this.
And Alejandra, was this mostly envisioned for commercial operations primarily, or was this more of a?
The pilot, I believe, is just for commercial operations. I mean, I may be wrong. This is something that we have been asking Caltrans and Sanda, and it was just like, I mean, like Disneyland, I haven't been to Disneyland in a while, like a fast track pass, where you basically, like, you are ready, you submit your paperwork electronically, And basically customs tells you both, obviously CBP and Mexican customs have to be in agreement. Okay, you can now come into the commercial port between 10 and 10:30 or 10 and 11, where we don't even have to have a staging probably. I mean, that's again to be defined, because trucks can come directly from the manufacturing facilities. So you're basically eliminating these 4,000 trucks idling for hours, which is extremely polluting. I mean, that's the way we see
it. Tim, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, it's certainly if we could reduce the idling, I think it seems like this concept would do that. So I think that's great. I would encourage, I would assume Caltrans, encourage them to consider that this wouldn't be just like a transportation project, that if you could make the transportation across the border a lot more efficient and smooth, that would have like potentially pretty wide-ranging economic consequences. It could really change the calculus on where companies might decide to locate warehouses or businesses in general. And so I would hope that to the extent it's possible, modeling the benefits of this type of project could consider that there might be growth in the number of warehouses, growth in the number of trucks, growth in the number of crossings, and that there would be potentially an increase in that kind of activity. It wouldn't just be a flat amount, because I assume that there's a certain aspect of congestion at the border probably limits economic growth and the development of cross-border traffic. So I would just encourage Caltrans to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that, Tim. That's certainly, we can pass that word along to them to see if there's any work that's being done as part of their study to look at that kind of ancillary, it goes beyond transportation. Like you said, there's could be economic and I guess emission, there could be emission benefits, but I think for what you're saying, there could be also emission potential additions in some ways if some of that growth increases, like you're saying. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, it's this is one port of entry that's being looked at right now. It's maybe a scalable solution, but it's goods move on regional and national and international scales. So reducing the friction at the Baja California border might change the dynamics of goods moving through Southern California, Inland Empire, and ports of Lily, Long Beach. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
All right, great. Any other comments, questions on this project? Like I said, this isn't going to be the last time that you hear about this. We're hoping to have Jose Marquez Chavez come in from Caltrans. He's kind of the lead, I think, on this project, and he wasn't able to make it today. But we're hoping to get more of a more up-to-date presentation from him in February to see where we're a little bit more context to the project, and to better understand where it's at and how it might, how we might want to think about it in relation to what we're talking about here in this group. So if you do have any other questions, we'll certainly forward what we have tonight to Jose, and then anything else we can bring up at the next meeting in February. As we continue to talk about how this might interconnect with what we're talking about at the warehouse level. Okay. With that, I think we'll move on to our final item for tonight, which is our continuation of some discussions relating to a possible incentive program model. And with this, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Randy too.
Thank you, Nick. The next presentation item will be an incentive program that was introduced during last month's meeting as a potential non-regulatory strategy for warehouses. We are introducing this concept again based on initial feedback and for further discussion. The incentive program would be modeled after a voluntary vessel speed reduction, VSR, program along the coast of California known as Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies. In the VSR program, vessel operators are asked to slow down to a speed of 10 knots or less within the approximately 200 nautical mile VSR zone, which thereby reduces air pollution, fatal strikes on endangered whales, and ocean noise. Monetary incentives in the VSR program range between $2,500 to $20,000 per company. The incentives are awarded in 3 tiers based on the percentage of total miles traveled in the VSR zone at 10 knots or less. We received good feedback from the WWG about potentially exploring a similar model for providing grant funding in a similar fashion to warehouse entities that could sufficiently demonstrate zero-emission truck visits to each of their facilities. As APCD envisions right now, if the program works similarly as the VSR program, warehouse entities of any size, or the trucking companies with ZEV trucks that serve them, would pre-register to participate in the program. After being approved in the program, onboard GPS systems and fleet management software would be used to track the visits to each respective warehouse or distribution facility of each ZEV truck participating in the program. APCD or a contractor handling the program would then verify the trip and location data for the ZEV trucks, and once verified, issue payment per ZEV truck visit. It's likely the total amount received by a particular warehouse entity or trucking company could be capped at a certain total amount given limited funding resources. And again, in line with the governing board's direction, some concepts that APCD may consider including in such an incentive program are giving larger warehouses outside disadvantaged communities, DACs, a smaller dollar amount per ZEV trip, and smaller warehouses located in DACs getting a larger dollar amount per trip and or prioritized access to funding. Next slide, please. APCD would like to explore this model further to ensure it can meet the needs of those participating in the program and to truly incentivize ZEV truck visits and turnover of existing combustion fleets. Here are some questions for the group's consideration. What reimbursement model would work best? Vouchers, rebates, etc. What frequency for reimbursement would work best? Quarterly, monthly? Is a per trip dollar amount for a ZEV truck visit enough to incentivize a fleet to procure or lease a zero-emission truck with possible infrastructure and down payment constraints? And would an incentive that targets infrastructure first be better? We also want to make sure the WWG understands that this potential program concept would likely require review and approval by the AB 617 Community Steering Committees, or CSC, as well as CARB. This kind of project isn't a typical project that can readily be used by air districts, such as those found in our Carl Moyer program. It is likely the district's AB 617 funding would be the only pot of money we could use with this kind of project. As a result, this kind of project would likely be classified as a community identified project that would first be reviewed and approved by the relevant AB 617 steering committees, likely Portside and the international border. If it gets the approval of those committees, the project proposal would then be forwarded to CARB for final review and approval. APCD recently went through this process as part of the zero emission truck pilot project we did with the Port of San Diego. Next slide, please. We'd like to now pause the presentation to take any questions or comments you may have at this time on the potential incentive program. I'd like to now go back one slide to put up the questions that were posed about the incentive program approach we're thinking about and how we might develop it more. Note that we are planning to also bring in some trucking representatives to our next WWG meeting to hopefully better develop some of these concepts as well.
Alejandra.
Yes, and I think the truckers definitely need, you would probably need definitely their feedback, but not just the truckers, because we have different entities, the warehouse operator and the owner of the building. So the question is, who gets the reimbursement? Is it the warehouse owner, the warehouse operator, or the trucker? And the truckers, they change the locations where they deliver all the time and basically depending on demand. So it might be like extremely different circumstances, but again, it's great that you're bringing in truckers, but you probably also, again, need to bring in warehouse operators and warehouse owners and do a focus group with, I think, that the three entities to see how this could work.
Yeah, I agree, Alejandra. I think getting feedback from really all three of those entities is needed. And we're hoping that, I've said it at past meetings, but I'm still hoping that we can get some more warehouse operators and warehouse owners on the line as part of this group. I know invitations have gone out. We're still hoping to get a lot more feedback from those entities in particular to answer that question directly, is, what works best really for everybody, with those things in mind. And not every situation is going to fit for every single fleet or warehouse operator. We understand that everything's different. But we're hoping to get kind of the most, what do we think would probably provide the most benefit with this kind of a program? Would we be able to get, most of the fleets? Would we get more value in targeting the fleets, or would we get more value in targeting the warehouse operators who might contract with those fleets? So just understanding that and better, it will help us in trying to tailor a program that can be successful. And, we don't want to put out a program that really isn't successful. We want to make sure that people can use this and it's being used for the intent that we want to see, which is to increase the amount of zero emission truck visits. So yeah, I think that's a great comment. And I do want to also note that the reason why we were continuing to talk about this model as kind of a reminder for folks who haven't been involved in this working group. We presented a timeline to our board a few months ago that laid out kind of a parallel timeline, which involved regulatory options and non-regulatory options for getting emission reductions for indirect sources in warehouses. And so part of the timeline we talked about with the board was, let's try and get to a non-regulatory option, as quickly as we can, knowing that a regulatory option could take a while to get to, and that still could be a year to 2 years off, depending on how long the rulemaking might take. So we want to continue to talk about this non-regulatory incentive program concept as much as we can at this meeting and probably the next couple of meetings too, because we want to try and get a program up and going as quickly as we can. We know the community identified project model takes some time to get approved through the steering committees and with CARB. Doesn't take a ton of time, but it's something that we need to factor in as well as part of this. That if anything is going to roll out that requires that kind of approval process, then we need to kind of get going on it as quickly as we can. But also knowing that we want it to be a successful program. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who hasn't been clued in for previous meetings. Tim.
Thanks. What I remember, one of doing the SB 671 work with the California Transportation Commission, one of the barriers for companies looking to potentially set up charging infrastructure that would be publicly available as like a retail service. One of the barriers for them opening, at least in early years, is they don't necessarily have a ton of customers. We all know that truck electrification is coming, but it's kind of coming slowly over 10 to 20 years, as we heard from the CARB presentation. But I think that this, a per trip dollar, incentive for ZEV truck visits, I think that would do a pretty good job of creating a lot of new customers. If the incentive is large enough, I think that would provide a good incentive for operators to purchase zero emission trucks in the short term. And that would be good for also for the charging infrastructure companies who would offer that as a service. So I think that would do a good job of making that available in the short term.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And we'd have to continue to see if that model would be best suited. Maybe it's a dual approach, like we talked about in a previous meeting, where there's a truck incentive for a warehouse operator and a truck owner together to potentially get a monetary benefit per trip. We'll have to see what can work best and how far we could go with any potential funding that we might put as part of this potential program, to see if that could be done. But there was some good feedback we received at the last meeting, where we're having both entities in some ways getting some skin in the game as part of any kind of program might be useful to getting ultimately where we want to go. Now, complexity to that gets complex when you start adding in more and more people to any kind of program like that. But that's certainly, we might need to explore something like that to be able to get to where we're going.
Yeah, let me just jump in on that, Nick, that from the administrative point of view, we need to create a program that we can actually carry out. And so some of the questions we are going to need to, try to figure out if we wanted to do a project that had this sort of model was, how we deal with the logistics of making sure that we're getting the documentation we need to justify those incentives, how we work through the payment process on, who gets paid and how much they get paid, and how we track all of that. There's going to have to be some significant accountability measures in an incentive program like this, to reassure both the Air District and CARB for, where that money comes from, and the communities, that it's really benefiting the trips that we're trying to focus on for some of these actions. So answering those questions about, is it warehouse owners or operators or trucking companies or logistics services or infrastructure providers who are receiving those incentives, it's going to be really important. And I hope you all will help us kind of figure out a program that both makes sense from the incentive side and makes sense from the administrative side for us to be able to carry out a successful program. How big do those incentives need to be? How do we scale them up and down depending on demand? All of those things are things that we're going to have to take some significant looks at. So if any of you on this call on the working group have some scenarios for, in a perfect world, here's what I would like to see in an incentive program, that would be helpful information for us. So please share that. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Kathy. No, that's great. And I would add, we're open and available. Since we only got a few minutes left in this meeting, please contact us after the meeting or send us an email where we can set up a time to chat if there's a situation that you think would work. And work for your fleet. Hey, that's helpful. That's useful information that we could use to kind of jump from and kind of get to the questions that Kathy was saying. So we're open and available to talk about that offline if you want to discuss in more depth. Any other last closing remarks on this concept before we kind of wrap up and get to our last couple slides? Okay, well, we'll certainly be talking about this, as we kind of alluded to. We're gonna hopefully bring in some trucking companies at our next warehouse working group meeting, and hopefully get their perspective on this kind of a program, to maybe get some feedback from them, and hopefully we can get some warehouse owners on the line as well, so we can start getting some feedback to point us in a good direction of where to go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the final 2 slides, I guess, here. We're at time, so I think we're probably going to have to skip non-agenda and participant comments. If you do have any comments you'd like to make, you can feel free to send them to me, and if it's something that's of benefit to the group, we can certainly pass it along after the meeting. Next slide. Oh, and then as far as the next meeting goes, our next meeting is back to our normal schedule, which is the first Monday of the month. That's going to be February 5th. As a reminder, we're going to be doing our meetings at least for the first couple months, and possibly for the foreseeable future at this time slot from 3 to 5 p.m. Right now, our tentative agenda topics look like we're like we mentioned, we're hoping to have somewhat of a focus group to talk about the incentive program, and then also hoping to get a presentation from Caltrans about the appointment system in Calexico. And as a reminder, notifications are going to be sent out to those to subscribe to our warehouse working group email service prior to the meeting. We hope to get those out the Friday before the meeting. So if you're not signed up to get those, feel free to sign up on our website to do that, or you can contact us at the contact information on the next slide, which has me and Randy's email addresses. You can reach out to either of us and we can make sure you get signed up on that if you're not already. So with that, I think we're at time here, right at 5:01. And I appreciate everyone for hanging in there. And if we'll see you at the next meeting in February. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.